Hey everyone, thanks again for hitting that play button. This is another episode of the Dave Bullis podcast. So just before I get into everything, I just want to mention I've edited the podcast a little differently this week. As you could probably tell, that's because Audition has crapped out on me again, and Adobe Creative Cloud is the new kryptonite of my life. So next week, hopefully I'll have all these problems straightened out. I want to give a quick shout out to The Nice Guys, which is coming out Tuesday. That is my movie pick of the week. The Nice Guys was phenomenal, and it's probably my favorite movie of the year. It is good to see Shane Black back. I didn't mean to make that rhyme, but Shane is one of my favorite writers and directors, and it was just so much fun. So whether you decide to buy it or rent it, please use the links in the show notes. You can find it at davebullis.com, and that actually is my Amazon affiliate link. It really helps out the show. And speaking of which, I want to say thank you to everyone who keeps supporting the podcast by sharing the episodes on social media, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. It really helps to expand the reach of this podcast because at the end of the day, I can't do it alone. So again, thank you very much if you're one of the people that have shared an episode or just reached out to ask questions to some of the guests. It really does help out. And speaking of guests, on this week on the Dave Bullis podcast, I have a guest who has been on Malcolm in the Middle. She has been on Buffy. She has actually done a podcast herself. Now she's doing a lot of really great stuff in the producing space. This is episode 123 with guest Jenna Edwards. Jenna, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Good, thank you. I was just reading your bio, and that's actually really cool that you produced the first feature with Hulu, and I definitely want to get into that. But the first question I have for you is and I ask everyone this, and that is, Jenna, how did you find yourself in the film industry? Meaning, is this something you've always wanted to do, or is this something that you sort of just found yourself in one day?
It's a great question. I have a two-part answer to that. I always knew I wanted to be in the entertainment industry. I, truth be told, came out to LA to be an actor in television and got into film producing, kicking and screaming. So not really by choice, but I love it, and I'm so grateful to my friend who kind of drug me into it, and that's really the answer to that question. Kicking and screaming, and joyfully so.
Well, usually the kicking and screaming part I can relate to, but the joyfully so, not so much. But no, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I did look at your IMDb, and I did see you have some really awesome credits, as an actress. So that's why when I saw that, I said, wow. I said, Jenna either has tremendous connections or luck, or she started off as an actress, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Because, you were on an episode of Unsolved Mysteries.
Yes.
You were on Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yes.
Malcolm in the Middle.
Yo.
And I mean, right there, those two shows right there, not even counting Unsolved Mysteries, those two shows right there are cult shows.
I know.
That, especially Buffy.
I feel like it wasn't me. I still am like, wow, that was really cool. How lucky am I? Yes.
So how did you get the job on Buffy? Did you just go to a casting call, or did you actually know somebody who just said, hey, Jenna, why don't you come to this casting call, and we'll see what happens? So how did you get on the show of Buffy?
Sure. It's all started with Unsolved Mysteries, actually. I moved to Los Angeles, and my neighbor was an actor as well, and he was here longer than me, and so he introduced me to his manager, and his manager got me the audition for Unsolved Mysteries, and I hate saying this so much because actors hate me when I do. Unsolved Mysteries was my first audition in Los Angeles, and I booked it, and I got my SAG card. And people are like, really? I'm like, yes. But I did that show, and then I was able to sign with this really great agent because I had my SAG card, and I did a showcase, not an actor showcase in the traditional format, but I was in a class that had a showcase at the end, and I met this agent, and we met and we got along really great. And I actually started working for him, which I strongly suggest every actor get their butts into agencies, management companies, and casting and see if they can intern or be an assistant, because you learn so much about the other side of the table that I think makes actors much more hireable. But I digress. So then I had an audition for Buffy the year before its last season. And you guys, literally, I was the day before I got this phone call. I was like, that's it. I'm done. Acting is so hard. I'm going to leave, you know? And it was more like just a release of not caring so much about the outcome of certain things. Like when we're acting, we get in our heads and we're like so tied to getting this one role. And I literally the next day woke up and my agent was like, you booked Buffy. And I was like, I don't understand the words that you're saying because I haven't auditioned for Buffy in over a year. And so I feel like they've made a mistake. And he's like, no, they really liked your audition the year before. And I was like, woo, Buffy. And then I got the script and it was just this one little 7-second scene. And I say that with all the respect in the world. But at the time, you know, as an actor, you're like, oh, they hired me because I'm sturdy and I can block a punch. That's literally why I got cast in that role. But then I've had so many amazing experiences with it because that role, I don't know if you saw it, Dave, but it was the last episode of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And she was doing this amazing speech talking about how, like, some guys decided that there would be only one Slayer and we're deciding to change all of that. And so basically anyone who would be a Slayer is now going to be a Slayer because we need everyone to be empowered. And during that montage, I blocked a punch and rose into frame and inherited her power. And that 7 seconds has literally had a huge impact on so many people that I've met that are fans of the show. I had one woman say that it inspired her or empowered her to leave her abusive boyfriend. And so it was this true testament of there are no small roles. And, you know, you just have to be grateful for every opportunity that you get. And now I get to say I'm a Slayer. It's pretty freaking rad.
Yeah, you know, I agree with you completely, you know, because I have seen, you know, some actors, they'll get a role in a part in a movie or a TV show, and they sort of don't like the fact that they're not the star.
Right.
And I've had friends who are actors come to me and they say, I don't want to be in this film because of blah, blah, blah. And I said, are you kidding me? I said, do you know how many actors would kill for this? Because they could turn that into something else. Because you know what it means? It means you can, you know, you take this part, no matter how big or small it is, and you use that to parlay into something else. And I don't mean that in a bad way,
No.
but I mean that in a good way because, you know, like the saying, Jenna, in Hollywood, you're only as good as your last project.
Absolutely.
And that way you could say, hey, well, hey, you know, I'm sure when you went on auditions, you probably said, hey, I was in Buffy. I've done, I was the girl in Buffy, you know, and again, the fans that resonated with them.
Yeah.
Because like I said, that's a cult show. And I mean, you know, that has a pretty rabid fan base.
Yeah, it does. And they're so amazing. It's fascinating. You know, that was my experience with there are no small roles, you know, that saying there are no small roles, only small actors. And then the Malcolm story, I have stories for everything. It's so funny. The Malcolm story was like my realization of you're never auditioning for one role. You're auditioning for any role. Because I went in there, the audition was for one line in the show. And Bryan Cranston, who is like one of the coolest people, you guys, he directed the episode that I was in, and it was so fascinating to watch him go from Hal, the goofy dad, to director. He's just brilliant. And so anyway, I went into the audition to audition for one line, and I ended up booking a whole week's worth of work. Like they were like, oh, you need to read for this other role. And I booked the bigger role because I just wasn't attached, like I said in the beginning, to the outcome of what was going to happen. I was just in there so excited to be auditioning again. Because I had taken off quite a bit of time from it. And so it's fascinating. it's fascinating the experiences you get to have when you just open yourself up to all the possibilities.
Yeah, I concur. And before I continue on, I wanted to ask you, I just want to take one step back very
Hmm.
quickly, tell you a funny story real quick.
Awesome.
Because this is, because just as we were talking about Unsolved Mysteries and Buffy, I had a short little story I wanted to tell you, and I think you'll get a kick out of this. Uh, One time, I really don't act. I'm more of the behind the camera type of guy.
Hmm.
And I had a friend of mine he owns his own production company. And he said to me, "Hey, why don't you come to this casting call we're doing? We're doing it for this barbecue thing. It's going to be a national wide commercial. He's like, and he's like, I just have a feeling. I just want to see you in this and try out for this role."
Cool.
And I said to him, "Okay, sure. I'll come. I said, if you want me to, I'll come out." So I went in. And there's the it's not a green room, but it's the room everyone, all the actors and everyone, you check in and you sit down, everyone's reading their lines. And well, as I'm sitting there, somebody comes out, who I think it was his assistant, and he recognized me. Well, then everybody comes out, like the from casting, like, you know what I mean? Like, they were in there doing the auditions. So three people come out and they're all shaking my hand, like, "Oh, good to see
Aw.
you here, Dave." And the funny thing is, like, some of the actors were giving me a look like, "Who is this guy? And how the hell should we even audition? Does this guy already have the role?"
Aw.
And I was trying to explain to everybody, like, "Look, I'm not anybody famous. I just know the product guy who runs the production company." And I swear, I was like, "There's not a shot in hell I'm getting this." They ended up not giving it to me anyway. But, and it was funny too, because afterwards they were like, "Hey, Dave, after these auditions, why don't we go out and grab some lunch?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" So it's just funny because it's really like, who but that just was like overkill because,
Yeah,
it just was a funny little story. But I thought you'd get a kick out of it
that's funny.
because it seems so redundant. So I didn't get the role though,
Aw,
but it just reminded me what you're saying.
I'm sorry.
But
You're like,
it's
I'm
a,
not
well,
sorry.
yeah, I'm glad that an actor who was probably trying for years at their craft got the commercial spot, and not me just because I'm friends with somebody. But so you were on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Now, did Joss Whedon direct that episode?
He did.
So what
And
was it
I
like working with
still
Joss?
trip out about it. He, you know, so first of all, because I hadn't auditioned, I mean, I was really young when I booked that. And I hadn't auditioned for that specific role. I literally walked around all day on set thinking they had the wrong person and that the minute I meet Joss, he's going to be like, "Who the heck is this chick that I don't know?" It didn't happen that way. Thank goodness. But like Buffy was my first experience on a really like big production, and it was fascinating to me. First of all, I'm going to tell you two stories about Joss Whedon because it just to me tells the the story of who he is as a person. The first is, my rule was 7 seconds, but I was being abused. That's the whole point of it. Like I was able to finally stand up for myself because I inherited Buffy's powers and there was no way anyone was going to hit me again. But because I was being abused, I talked to him and I said, should I be crying or not? That was my question. And not only did so let me back up. Most directors would probably say no and then walk away and continue to do their thing. Not only did he stop and look at me and acknowledge that I had a question, he explained to me why I shouldn't be crying. And he was like, "No, because it's too much for the audience in that small amount of time." And as an actor, when you can get a why to the answer, it makes it so much easier for you to accept it and internalize it and become the character even more. It's a different way of asking what's my quote motivation. Um, but the fact that he was like so amazing, to stop and give me that attention or that time that I needed it was for me just incredible. And then, so I get done and little trivia here, I was the last scene ever shot on the show. And so when they called, cut, then they said that's a wrap. It was literally the last time that that crew was going to hear that in this production. And so when they did it, people started crying and they were hugging, and here I am all awkward. Like, I have known you people for a total of maybe 2 minutes now, and I'm going to go. Like, okay, I'm going to let you guys have your moment and I'm going to leave. And my set was in this giant warehouse. And my role was actually, quote, trailer girl, because I was in the trailer. That was my set. And so I'm in this like big Airstream trailer, and I step down and I go to walk across this giant warehouse to leave. And all of a sudden I hear, Jenna, wait, like really loud. And I'm like, oh crap, do I have, microphone? But no, I wasn't, there was no sound. And I'm having all these thoughts running through my head, and I turn around and here's Joss Whedon sprinting across this warehouse. And he's like, I just wanted to say thank you. And I was like, you realize you're Joss Whedon, right? Like, you realize that you just let me be in your amazing show, Buffy, and you're now thanking me? I was like, shut up. I can't even handle you. And then we took pictures, and it was just really great. It was such a fun experience, but that's the kind of guy he is. He's just a good guy. And I was so grateful to have that experience.
And that's amazing to hear, because I've always wanted to meet Joss.
Yeah.
But and I'm always interested, because when people who've actually worked with him, what he's like, his style, everything. I've always heard nothing but good things, by the way.
Yeah.
So because I've never met anybody who has anything bad to say about Joss.
I can't even imagine somebody having something bad to say. But again, that's my experience. So even if you did have a bad experience, I would ignore it, because I love mine so much.
So hopefully one day I will meet Joss and I won't have a bad experience.
There you go.
Because if I did have a bad experience, I'd have to call you back and be like, Jenna, I had a bad experience with him.
And then I would have to figure out how to get a hold of him again and be like, you need to apologize, because nobody in the world can think you are not the most wonderful human.
So after Buffy the Vampire Slayer, you did take a break.
Yes.
Now I know the story about what happened. Now, do you want to sort of fill in what happened between Buffy and when you went back to work as an actor?
I'm a total open book, but it opens up a can of worms. Are you ready?
I am ready, Jenna.
Okay. So Buffy aired, and I thought, as an actor, my whole life was about to change, and it was going to be great, and my career was going to take off, and all of this stuff was going to happen. Mind you, this was before social media. I believe that if social media existed, it probably would have taken off, and then things might have been even more complicated than they were. My life did change. It changed dramatically, but it wasn't because of acting. It was because I was on a break at work, and a man drove through the farmer's market in Santa Monica and killed 10 people and injured over 60 of us. And he hit me, they say, at about 60 miles an hour. And I suffered severe post-traumatic stress disorder, and I couldn't read, and I stuttered when I talked, and I forgot basic words, and I didn't sleep for 8 months. And I ended up in the psych ward, where I thought my whole life, let alone my career, was completely over. And I just didn't, it was very devastating and obviously life altering. And it took me 3.5 years before I could work again, and over 7 years before I didn't have a panic attack or a flashback.
So how did you, start to sort of, I guess, overcome all this, where, I'm sure there had to be, building blocks, you know what I mean? Like step by step. So how did you start your road to recovery?
Well, it was, first of all, my family has a history of addiction. And so I refused medication because I was so afraid that I would become an addict. It nearly killed me because my chemicals were so off that I needed that medication to regulate the chemistry in my body and be able to sleep and become, like I always say, I had a mental injury, not a head injury or a brain injury, but a mental one, where just like things weren't being processed the same way. And so I had to accept that I would be on medication, but I was very clear with my doctors that I wasn't going to be on this medication for forever. So we needed to have a full plan in place, and I needed to see that plan before I would do anything. And then my road to recovery really started when I accepted that I needed more help than I could get outside of a hospital, because I was trying to get the chemicals regulated at home, and it was a really scary process because some of them were affecting me in ways that they weren't supposed to be. And on top of the like people dying in my head every time I closed my eyes, I was also really scared of what the medication was doing. And so I checked myself into the psych ward after a really horrific episode with the medication. I won't get into that, but while I was in the hospital, my recovery started. I truly believe because Drew Barrymore was sharing her story at the time. And what I mean by that is Drew had a history with addiction, as most of us know. And at the time, there were all of these articles coming out about her coming back into her career and what she was having to do and all of that. And even though I couldn't read and process all of them, I was like, this woman's an inspiration. And so in my hospital room, I literally put up all these pictures of Drew Barrymore, just remembering her story and remembering how, people have the ability to come back from things that they don't think they can come back from. And not only did that experience kind of propel me towards recovery on my own, it also is a really big catalyst for what I believe part of my purpose on earth is, which is sharing. Like, it's so important to share not just your triumphs, but your struggles, so that people that are struggling can see what it looks like when you're done, when you're done struggling with whatever you're struggling with. And I also attribute, you probably are thinking of this if you've heard any of my interviews, Dave, but I attribute Alias a lot to saving my life. I know everybody's like, really, Alias? Yes, Alias. Listen to me. Like, Alias is the best show. I think it's the best show ever made. And when I got out of the hospital, they said you have to create a routine for yourself in order to kind of Pavlovian train your brain to go to sleep. And so at the time, Alias was my favorite show. So I literally watched an episode every night before I went to bed. And when I would watch it, it would train my brain to start to get sleepy. And I started to regulate my sleep, and I, recovered. And I never thought that would happen. While it was happening, I thought this was going to be my life forever. And so when I say that Alias saved my life, I'm not kidding.
So have you ever met anyone from Alias to tell them this, tell them the story?
No. But I kid you not, if I do, I'm going to look like the biggest nerd. Like, how do you even say that to someone? I'm sure J.J. Abrams wasn't thinking, I'm going to create this awesome show that's going to save someone's life. Like, what do you even say? Oh, J.J., thanks. No, but if you know anybody, I'm happy to tell them and thank them profusely for doing the work that they did.
I don't know anybody offhand, but if I ever stumble upon anybody, I promise I'll tell them. You have to talk to Jenna.
Oh, thanks. That would be awesome. I would be so excited. Look at me. I'm even nerding out now. Like, a grown woman is nerding out so bad right now at the idea of meeting those guys.
Yeah, and I mean, you never know, too, because there are cons, the Comic Cons, and then so you never know where you can bump into them.
Yeah, I know. I've always wanted to go to the cons and stuff, but because the crash happened right after Buffy, I feel like it's been way too long. But who knows? You know what? The thing that I've learned in my life is you just never know.
Yeah, very true.
You just never know.
Because there was actually Monster Mania was this past weekend and had a Buffy. I think I'm sorry. They're having a Buffy reunion coming up. That's what it is. Because I actually saw it. Yeah, because it's the Buffy the movie. and
fun.
so with Christy Swanson.
Yeah.
But I know they do Buffy the TV show as well. I've seen them all, all the time.
That's awesome.
But I mean, again, you never know, because I mean, there's always so many people at these cons now.
Yeah.
They just keep getting, more and more, and I mean, so as we continue your story, you were able to get, you got on the road to recovery.
Mm-hmm.
You were able, to get back to, to doing what you wanted to do, and you got the job, on Malcolm in the Middle.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you feel, I know this is, an interesting, just a question from an actor's standpoint. Do you feel Bryan Cranston understood actors in a different way because he is an actor?
Oh, I'm sure. He, I can't imagine him not understanding actors in a different way just because of who he is and how he's trained. Because he's a very well-trained actor, I guess I was just really excited to be on the show and watch him that I didn't even think about how he interacted with me or the other actors. It was just more my fascination with his ability to switch so efficiently from his character to who he is as a director that that's all I remember. I do remember one thing, and I'll tell all the actors listening this. So I had an insecure actor moment. We all have them, right? And I went up to Bryan and I said, is that what you wanted? And he was so gracious and said, look, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. He goes, as a director, if I don't like something, I will tell you. Otherwise, just as an actor, assume you're doing brilliant. And I was like, that's amazing. And now as a producer and watching the directors that I work with, direct actors, I can totally see that. So any actor listening, you got to kind of hide that insecure actor moment and really understand that if you're not getting notes, then you're doing it perfectly.
That is an excellent piece of advice.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely excellent piece of advice. I think that does well too if you're directing a scene where it includes a lot of actors, like 3, 4, 5 actors, because you know what I mean. It's hard to give adjustments to that many. You know what I mean?
It was, and it was a big crowd kind of scene that I was asking. Actually, now that you say that,
see, I'm reading your mind.
I know, Jenna. I love it. I love it. But yeah, I've been so lucky to be able to work with people who are really great at giving advice. And I'm so grateful to that, I think that's why I've been able to kind of move my career forward whenever I choose to, because I get to be surrounded by incredible people. So many people think that they're just all sharks in Hollywood. And it's not my experience. My experience has been just gracious, wonderful, creative, collaborative people. And Bryan is absolutely at the top of that list.
Yeah, that's something I found too. 'Cause, I mean, not to deviate too much from this conversation, but I have a friend of mine who just posted online. Mm-hmm. He's a screenwriter, and he's been trying to be a screenwriter for like 20 years. He can't get anybody to be his agent or manager. And when you see what he posts on Facebook, it's like, this is probably the reason. Very angry, very bitter, very condescending. Oh. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, I wonder how he talks to agents and managers. I wonder if he probably just walks in there and goes, you know what, I'm the biggest deal in this town. You just don't recognize my brilliance. And you should be begging to sign me. I kind of have a feeling that's what he does when he either, sends an email or a query letter or anything like that. And I mean, I've had,
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, I love talking about this subject so thank you for bringing it up, and I'll let you continue. And then I have stuff to add.
Oh, I was just going to say, because I had one other person, and they actually, their production deal fell apart with a producer, mm-hmm. and he actually made a post calling the producer out, saying, just going on and on. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, who would want to work with you after making a post like that?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, and that's exactly it, right? So this is mostly to actors, but really any crew. My whole thing is and if you could see me now, I'm raising my hand. In one hand, you have to be really good at your job. But guess what, guys? There are a lot of people really good at their jobs. I mean, I hate to say it, especially here, like we're in Los Angeles, where the cream of the crop come, to try and make it. So it's like you've got to be not only really good at your job, but on the other hand, you have to be really easy to work with. And I'm not saying you have to be a doormat. That's not easy to work with. But you have to be, like, my litmus test is, can you do your job? And can I spend 30 days in the middle of a cornfield in Nebraska without wanting to kill you? That's literally how I choose, or how I go through the actors and crew, because that's really what happens. Like we shot, I've shot several movies in the middle of a cornfield in Nebraska, which is hard work, and you don't have all of the luxuries and available items that you might need when you're shooting in Los Angeles. So you've got to be able to roll with the punches and still do a great job and be fun. And we have to be able to laugh. And people always talk about how much nepotism there is in Hollywood. But here's the way I look at it. I want to work with my friends, so I want my friends to be really good at their jobs so that I can justify working with them because I trust them. My reputation is on the line when I hire someone or when I cast someone. And if you're going to make life hard for everybody on my team, then they're going to come to me and they're going to be like, what the F did you do? And I'm going to have to justify it. So, you've got to be gracious and understand everybody's position. And that person that posted that thing about the producer and the deal falling through, I mean, I don't know the details, but I've had deals fall through that I've worked tirelessly on. And so if somebody was going to call me out on it, it would be just like, first of all, untrue, because there's no way I would go into a project without wanting to actually make it happen. And second of all, like, it just shows to me that that person making that post is amateur and doesn't understand the process. And so you've got to be just careful about, showing your hurt feelings, because the producers probably hurt just as much. They work tirelessly to get these deals together. And a lot of times they work tirelessly for free to get the deals together. And then, to have their reputation drug through the mud because something didn't happen, it's just not fair.
Yeah, this screenwriter, there were two different screenwriters,
Mm-hmm.
and both of them, always complain about not being able to find money, and especially the one, and the other one usually complains about not being able to find representation. And I always go back to, I don't think anybody wants to work with you because they can tell that you are going to be a huge pain in the ass.
No, it's true. Well, and desperate. I mean, I hate to say it, but I'm sure everybody's heard, like, you can smell desperation. And this goes to pretty much anybody, but writers and actors especially, which is such a great segue into one of my missions, which is empowering people who feel disempowered in this industry. That writer does not need representation. It is 2016. If he really wanted to be a screenwriter, he would figure out how to get his movie made without an agent. You know what I mean? And so it's almost like this gut check for certain people where do you want to write because you love to write, or do you want to have a career in writing? Because they're very different. One leads into the other, but the idea of having a career means that you have to treat it like a business. And if you're going to treat it like a business, then you're going to get off your butt and you're going to figure out how to get your writing seen, whether it's by an agent, whether it's by other writers. But more, the way that I would suggest is go out and find a producer that you do work well with and get your project made, even if it's a short film, so that you can show people what you've got instead of counting on them to discover. It's the difference between creating your career and hoping to be discovered. And I feel like it's the same with writers and actors and creative people in general, because nowadays you can't I always used to say this when we were shooting April Showers, which was like 2008, you guys. So it was way before social media was what it is now. But I would always say you can't talk about making a movie anymore because some kid with their iPhone is recording it, making it into some video and putting it up online and making millions. Like you have to actually make your content now. And if you've got a big giant script that is going to be, the next Transformers, then obviously you need to write something smaller that can be made as a calling card.
Yeah, and I understand completely what you mean. 'Cause back when I was crowdfunding, 2009, 2010, nobody knew what Indiegogo was. I had to explain
Right.
to so many people what Indiegogo was, and they were like, "Is this legal? Is this?" And I said, "Yes, yes, it's legal." And I had people send me messages saying that it was, you can't actually ask for donations unless you are a charity.
501c3.
Yeah, yeah. And he said you can't unless you're that. He goes, and you can't ask for money unless you're actually have either another actually a corporation yourself. He goes, so crowdfunding that I don't know what this is and blah blah blah. And I said, listen, I said. I sent back this email, explained what it was. I had a producer on the project, one of my projects go, he looked at it and he goes, I think we need to make it clear that they're not buying investment in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I said, it's clear on the website. I said, it's clear as a bell. I said, I don't know what more I can do. And every person that I would get aboard the project was like baffled about crowdfunding. And, I hope to crowdfund another project by the end of the year.
Cool.
But I'm actually going to go with Indiegogo. I mean, with Kickstarter this time. But I think this is a problem that I find myself, and I don't know, maybe this is something that you find with a lot of your clients, is that I tend to write things that either are too expensive because there's a location that I can't get,
Right.
or I require some kind of explosion or whatever. And on the flip side, when I try to write stuff that's more low key, it's just
It's not
it doesn't
your
have.
style.
Exactly. That's my problem. Or maybe it's a little too offbeat is what I'm trying to say,
Mm.
because you know what I mean? Like it's almost like an indie film that if somebody read the script without having like David Lynch or somebody else on the cover, or you know what I mean, like somebody who can make a film for $4, $5, $6 million, but it's going to be it's in a person who knows what they're doing,
Yeah.
a person who because you know what I mean, they don't want to spend $5 million on somebody new. And, they're going to say, well, what's the biggest budget, you've ever worked with? Do you have a producing team? And you know what I mean? And they don't want to, at that point, I mean, and I still don't have a producing team that comes with me. You know what I mean? It's just usually just me, just little old me, Jenna. And they usually are like, hey kid, you got talent, but call us back when you have, when you have some more stuff under your belt.
Right. Well, here's the way that if you want, I would advise you specifically regarding that is create yourself a business plan. Like so many times I talk to filmmakers and they have no idea what their ultimate goals are and how and what the steps are to get there. So if you're wanting to create movies that are David Lynch-esque, then you make yourself the new David Lynch. And how do you do that? You say, okay, my ultimate David Lynch-esque movie is this project. What other smaller projects do I have or can I write that will cost maybe, under $500,000, let's say, that I can make in order to show people what I've got so that they'll give me $5 million for my ultimate project. And so that during the making of, let's say there's 3, they could even be short films. But there's 3 films that I'm going to write or I'm going to direct or I already have in my arsenal that I can use as building blocks to get to this ultimate $5 million project. And along the way, I'm going to get myself a producer that I really love working with that sees my vision. I'm going to get an actor that I know is going to blow up because he or she is going to be the perfect lead for my $5 million project. Like you start to gather your team while you're building up to getting that $5 million movie done. And you're building your team with product, right? Like we have to look at our films as product in order to make some of like show that you can distribute so you can make the money back on this like under $500,000 project, so that when you do go to investors for the 5 million, you can say, look, here's my track record, not only in the creative sense, but in the funding sense. I made, 10% profit on this one. We were able to check out or test out distribution models on this one, and we discovered that this works and this doesn't, and this pays and this doesn't. Like, it's time for filmmakers to start thinking of their careers as true production companies and businesses.
Yeah, I agree. It should be more of a business acumen to this. There should be more of a thought about, how the investors are going to get their money back.
Mm-hmm.
Jason Brubaker, who I've had on the show, even
I
said,
love him.
yeah, Jason's a great guy. He even said, hey, we're going to get my movie into Sundance isn't a business plan.
Yeah, no, please. Yeah.
but you see, it's funny.
Marketing plan.
Yeah,
which is part
right?
of the business plan, but it's absolutely not a business plan.
And I had on Morgan J. Freeman.
Okay.
And he was episode 99. And he actually won Sundance and was the first ever, I think, Triple Crown champion.
Nice. And
I mean, he has an amazing story about, why the movie was never released. Basically, he even admits this, so I'm not spreading dirt, but he even admit it went all to his head. And he got into trouble when he was blowing off meetings with Steven Spielberg.
Whoa.
Yeah. And but now he works for MTV, and everything I just said we went over with in the interview. But
sure.
Just that's why Sundance, maybe winning it isn't the best thing that could happen. Because it doesn't, there's no guarantees in life, right?
Absolutely. And it's so funny because my first feature, April Showers, like everybody behind the scenes, Sundance was our goal. That was our business plan. And so as somebody who made that their business plan and then was sadly, like we made this amazing movie, but it was about the Columbine story. So not the feel-good movie of the year. And while we were shooting, the market crashed and Sundance started taking comedies, and they shifted their kind of film selection criteria, and they started to program differently, and our film didn't get in. And so we had to then figure out how we're going to pay our investors back. And we did the second day and date, which was on iTunes and in the theaters at the same time. And at that time, it was like so unheard of. One other film had done it, and the theaters were freaking out. They called us the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. Like you said about your Indiegogo campaign, like we had to explain how it wasn't going to affect the theatrical release the way that they were thinking. And I kept using the analogy of Wolfgang Puck. I'm like, Wolfgang Puck's restaurants didn't go under when he started to serve frozen or put frozen dinners in the grocery store. His profits went up. Like it wasn't, they fed into each other. And so it was a lot of convincing that, the internet isn't actually going to kill your theatrical release. It's going to be a great way for people to, learn about the film in different avenues. And it's like a rock concert. If you want to go to a concert, you want to go to a concert, but you're not going to not buy the CD from the band. I almost think, and this is my theory, I think that theaters need to start selling digital copies of the movies in the lobby. I think after you see like an X-Men and you're so excited about it, you want that. I bet you people would make so much more money if they started selling digital copies. But that's just my soapbox.
Well, I actually think that, going along with that, it's what's going to happen is you're going to have to start selling like packages. Like you buy a ticket, you buy a shirt, you buy a hat, you get a digital download when that's released, and maybe some other like hard to come by collectible
right.
that, can't be 3D printed as readily. And, and you get that together, maybe even get to, it's sort of like what Brad Pitt did with World War Z, because it was getting all those, all that bad publicity. Mm-hmm. And then, he was going to mystery tours around, people were like, oh my God, what if he comes to ours? You know
right.
what I mean? And I think that helped it out. But it's funny, they're actually talking about a sequel to that with David Fincher directing, which I think is completely odd.
Oh, God, I
Um,
love this business.
yeah, I mean, World War Z. I actually read the book,
Yeah.
and the movie. I, I was like, what? What is going on here? There's so many times where I was like, what the hell is? Why are they doing this? Like, this is the part that really had me laughing. They're in. Have you seen World War Z?
Yes.
Okay, so they're in Jerusalem, and the Israelis have like walled off the city, and they're letting in everybody else one by one. Well, when the I think it was the Muslims started to sing, suddenly that's what attracted all the zombies. And they said, but I'm like, what about all the helicopters and
I
people
know.
talking? And I'm like, so what are like this? Is this singing driving them nuts? And I mean, it's just. I was like, what the hell is going on here? Because usually I'm the guy everyone asks after we see a movie, like, they want me to explain stuff. And I go, I have no idea about this one. You guys got me. How the zombies can tell the difference between all these noises and stuff like that. I just don't know. Uh, but I'm sorry to get sidetracked there. But
It's all good. I like action movies, so I'm very good at not analyzing action movies.
but like something like Die Hard comes along. And it's just like it flips everything. And I mean now because that's how like, people pitch stuff.
Right.
It's Die Hard in a blank. I had a friend of mine pitch Die Hard in a haunted house.
Nice.
Yeah,
I would watch that
I was
movie.
yeah, and I was like, how did this not sell? And he's like, Dave, that's a question I ask myself every day. Jen, I wanted to ask, just to sort of continue with this part of the conversation, what do you think are some of the main roadblocks to getting your film made?
Not having a plan is probably the biggest.
So
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, so do you think filmmakers, do you think that the script is just too much money? Like we were just saying with me, do you think that the script maybe isn't, feasible? Maybe they should, aim sort of smaller scope, make something for maybe 5, 10, 15,000, and shoot that short film first that, cost that, raise the, crowdfund that money,
I
go
think
from
it
there.
depends on what the goal is. It's really interesting how many filmmakers and actors and people in this industry will just do anything. And what I've learned is until you're at a certain level, you really have to focus on one thing to start. And what I mean by that is, like if you really want to be doing romantic comedy, and that's your ultimate goal, please don't make a horror movie because you think it's easier to sell. Because then you're dealing with distribution companies that aren't in line with what you want to be doing ultimately. You're dealing with financiers that aren't in line. You're dealing with cast and producers and like every single person that you're putting your time and energy into developing a relationship with when you're making a horror film. They're not over here. They're not going to be the ones that help you make your romantic comedy. So instead, start to focus on networking with people in the romantic comedy space. Maybe getting some, if you want to be a director, getting on some TV shows in the more comedy space. Going to film festivals that focus more on the romantic comedies rather than the horror. Like all of the things that you should be doing should be focused in the genre that you really want to be working in. And I'm not saying that you can't make friends with people that are doing things outside of your genre. I'm just saying be a little more strategic in the choices. Let me rephrase that. Being a little more specific with the areas that you spend your focused time on. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes perfect sense.
And I mean, it's heartbreaking to me because I've seen so many filmmakers not working in the area that they want to be working in, and they work for 10 years and then they don't have the contacts they need to make the project they actually want to make. This whole business is all about building. It's like you have to think of it like a house. Your foundation, then you got your walls, and you got your drywall and your paint, and it takes years to build that type of career. But if you're working on the foundation on this one house, and then you're going over and you're working on walls in a different house, and then you're going over and you're painting a different house, like it doesn't make sense. So it's really important to think of it as a business. Like if you were in banking, you wouldn't be networking with a ton of people who were in film. Like it just doesn't it doesn't make sense. And that's specific networking. And I do have to say that Los Angeles is built for networking. So the people that are outside of LA or a really strong film community might not have the opportunities to network the same way. But and they also might think of it as a 4-letter word. And I really want you to stop that, because I used to think that way. Like we think, oh, you just want to meet me because you want something or you need something. But the reality is, in film, everybody wants something and everybody needs something. So when you're networking, it's not an icky thing. It's not like you're going to come in and take advantage, because you're literally like, I of course want to network with directors because I'm not one. So I need one. And they of course want to network with me because they're not producers and they need one. So it's this wonderful dance of needs and wants, and how can we all help each other, as opposed to thinking, oh, I feel gross because I'm just going to ask for something. It's a big mental shift that needs to happen for a lot of people when it comes to networking. And then being really specific about who you're networking with, and not wasting your time networking with somebody you don't like, you know? Like,
Yeah.
I've really made a deal with myself. I don't work with people I don't like anymore. It's just not worth it. There's too many awesome people in this industry that, why bother? And then you're wasting, this is a really great way to look at it for me anyway, because I did really feel icky when I first came to LA. But the reality is, if I'm spending time with someone I know I'm never going to work with, or I know I don't really like, but they might be able to help me, I'm wasting their time as well. And that's just no good for anybody. So only spend time with the people that you actually really want to work with and you really like, and you're aligned creatively, and energetically, to not
Yeah.
get too foo-foo.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, because I've had friends who have had producers, they're directors, and they've had producers come on and they just don't gel. And
Yeah.
I've always said this to people too. If you're the type of guy where everything is by the book and you have to be professional, you have to work with people like that.
Absolutely.
If you hire a producer who's like, hey, nothing's a big deal, let's just throw everything to the wind. It's not going to work well, because you're just going to be a mixed match of styles.
Yeah.
And it's just not going to work. And even myself, my own projects, I have worked with producers and DPs and actors who just aren't my style.
Mm-hmm.
And that's and I came to the same conclusion. I don't want to work with these people anymore, who are time and energy vampires,
Mm-hmm.
who want to call you constantly to complain about something that someone did or might do. For instance, I had a project one time, and this one guy kept calling to complain about my producer. And I said, what is the problem here? Like, why do you guys keep freaking arguing? I was thinking to myself, how much overlap do you guys even freaking have? You know what I mean? Like, what are you guys, like, bumping into each other in the supermarkets? Like, and he would tell me, oh, the producer's condescending. And I said, listen, this producer is like one of the nicest guys. I think he's too nice. In fact, if you told me that, I would agree with you. But, it's just stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I mean, some people's egos get have you ever seen the movie Overnight by it focuses on Troy Duffy, who did the Boondock Saints?
No.
It basically follows him at the minute he gets his deal to make the Boondock Saints with Miramax.
Uh-huh.
His ego goes off the freaking rails, and I mean, he ends up, the movie gets in turnaround. Then they had to find funding somewhere else, and I mean, it's just basically about a guy getting his dream and just destroying it because he's his own worst enemy.
Oh,
And I think it's happening to a lot of people in
yeah,
this business.
it does.
Is that their ego just gets in the way.
No, I love that you're talking about ego, because it's something I talk about immediately if I'm about to go into a project, because my whole thing is we have to know what we want to do with the project. So what's the project's goal, basically? Is it to go theatrical? Is it to go to Hulu? Is it to go, a film festival route? Like, what is it? And make that decision, because that's the thing also, back to your question earlier about, what do you think the the things filmmakers don't have in place. And that's part of the plan. Part of the plan is, what are you going to do with the film once it's done? It's great if your mom thinks it's great and you want to show it in the basement, more power to you, but you can't raise money with a plan like that. And you also can't make an effective movie if you don't have a plan. So we sit down, my whole team and we sit down and we decide, this is where the project's going. This is how we're getting there. If some other great opportunity comes up in the meantime, we'll obviously talk about it, but this is the plan, right? And then there's a whole conversation about ego, because negative ego tends to come from insecurity. And as a producer, I feel like it's my job to make sure that people feel secure in the process, especially the director and the creative people in the project, because you have to feel secure in order to create big, is my thought on it. But the thing is that in that creating big, if they feel secure, they can remove their ego from it, understanding that everybody is working towards the same goal. And so I flat out say, there will be no ego, because our biggest question whenever we're having a conversation and there's a difference in opinion has to be, what's best for the project? And so that phrase comes out of my mouth at least 1,000 times on every project I work on. Because if you can really go, okay, this issue that we're having, like, you've given an opinion and you've given an opinion, but which opinion or which plan of action is best to get us to the goal at hand? What's best for the project? And then that way it doesn't matter whose opinion it is. It's just what's best for the project. And all ego can be removed and everybody can feel happy about it, and it's all good. I found that that's like literally the secret to having a harmonious production.
That's a very good tip. The next film project I do, that would be something I want to talk about. When doing, getting everyone together, all the producers especially, because
I know.
And the producers, because I've had some producers before, they've come to me to figure out a problem, and I said, I'm trying to direct the project here. Why are you coming to me to talk to me about a problem?
Yeah.
And
that's not okay.
And me and the producer in the middle of the set got into a huge screaming match. And I'm a fellow ginger, Jenna, and I can out scream a lot of people. But most people who, like, you heard me on the podcast are like, nah, Dave's, and believe me, when I have like that ginger temper where I just start screaming, and she actually walked off and was like, I don't know why you're so angry. I said, you don't know why I'm so angry. It's like one of those things. And then she walks away and leaves me with the problem. And then I'm like, then she was, later on, her and I are arguing again. She's like, well, you weren't directing the actors, and why isn't the camera, why isn't this equipment set up? I said, why aren't you talking to my first AD? Why are you talking to me about this?
Right.
And again, now we're going back and
why?
Why she was telling me the problems?
Yeah, it's because most people who are producers don't actually understand what producers do. It's such a problem. Like, I have to educate people on what producers do all the time. And so another tip that might help is if you have multiple producers and there's no clear lead producer, first, if you can remedy that, if you can put like a lead producer on the books, do it, because then the buck stops there. And they would be more like your producing partner as a director. Like, they would totally be your eyes and ears in production so that you understood what's going on. But then also, if you have multiple producers, assign them something to be in charge of, because oftentimes they don't know where the buck stops, because there's 4 of them, for example, and there's so many different duties that are going on, and they're like, well, who's in charge of it? And then the ball drops. So, you have a producer in charge of the cast. Like, that's really crucial. You have a producer who's in charge of locations and shaking hands and kissing babies while we're on set. Crucial. You have a producer who's in charge of crew, and anything that goes wrong with crew, just making sure that there's one person who's in charge of these different areas will help, I think, alleviate you getting bothered on set with things that aren't your responsibility.
Yeah, very true. Part of the problem was my producer was supposed to be, when I'm not around, he was supposed to be the lead producer.
Mm.
He had a crush on this one producer, and that, that whole thing, so he never really wanted to admonish her or say anything to her, and was always like everything she did was, the work of, of a god. And we had a long talk about that as well, he and I, after the production. And
unfortunately, after the production, right?
yeah, well, because I kept saying, why are you making excuses for this woman? And finally, because see, I have a background in business, and I'm always hire slow, fire fast. And as soon as I start seeing problems, I want to start firing.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't even want to deal with this. Because, you know what I mean? It's like going up a mountaintop, and you're going up this mountain, and people are trying to pull you back because they want to talk to you about, hey, what about this base camp we were just at? Should we talk about this? I don't like the way we're climbing. Why are we in these work clothes? It's too cold up here, And you're like, no, if we just move forward and keep rolling, these problems aren't actually problems. You're a problem inventor. There's a problem inventors and problem spotters and problem solvers. And I kept telling the producers, I was like, you guys are problem spotters. You don't fix problems. And then, of course, I get the condescending reply, Jenna, well, we're not as smart as you.
Oh my gosh. Fire. And
yeah.
here's the thing too. I feel like indie filmmakers do not feel empowered to fire their producers. And I've been in that situation myself. You have to work in a clause in your contract that you can't get stuck with people who aren't helpful.
Yes. And that is something too I learned, because when I went to my entertainment lawyer, I was saying, when we draw up new contracts, I was like, for the next project, I want to have in English, in written word,
right.
What happens if they get fired on day one? What happens if they get fired on the last day? What rights do they still have? All that stuff. So basically, by the time I'm done, Jenna, these contracts are like, you could hold it in front of you, and it would be like, it could stop bullets.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Totally. Yeah, I do. Well, it's interesting to go back to your $5 million project, and that is that this is you testing out which producers you can bring along on that project, which ones are going to actually help you get that project done so that the investor can see, okay, we've worked together before. Here's the thing with investment. They're not investing in the project. They're investing in you and your team. So it's crucial to remember that and to realize that you need to stack the deck in your favor as far as you as the filmmaker is concerned, I mean, obviously they're going to care about the project, but they're going to care more about whether or not you can get the project done effectively without any of the drama. And if you can show that you've done it successfully on a couple of other films, then you're more likely to be able to get some money in hand.
Yeah. As far as when I go to, actually present some of this stuff, that's right. They are investing in you and the production and all that, and your team.
Yeah.
And, you have to have that sort of track record, and they want to make sure that, you're not, obviously you know what you're doing, and, it's not going to be wasted. You're not going to come back. I mean, because I've had people who've crowdfunded money and they've wasted it all because they didn't understand how to budget that money. And I mean, yeah, seriously. I mean, I could go on and on about that. I know we're starting to run out of time, Jenna, but I had a question come in over Twitter. And I wanted to ask you, and this is from Podcast Reviews at the Hypocritics. And her question was, as a producer, what is the best way to present yourself on set to the cast and crew without overstepping your role?
Ooh, good question, right? Here's the thing. I wanted to actually say this before. A lot of times producers are creating problems that they can solve so they can be the hero on set. Here's the great thing about good producers. Production happens before set even exists. So a lot of times what I mean by that is crew will complain like, oh, that producer's not doing anything except sitting behind Video Village. if they're able to sit behind Video Village and everything is running smoothly, it means they did their job, because your job as a producer is mostly in pre-production. Now, to be able to be a confident producer on set, don't create problems that you're going to just fix right away. And if there is a problem, just handle it. Not everybody needs to know that you're doing your job. You know, like we had a saying on one of our sets, because we had a producer like that on it, where we were like, it's kind of your effing job. Like, just do your job, you know? But the way that I've learned is the most effective way to get the crew to understand kind of where you're at is be completely open to, if they need anything, if they have questions, never ever say no without looking into it. Like if somebody says, hey, I need an extra $1,000 to get this piece of equipment that we really need for this shot, your response is always, let me check on it. And then actually check on it. Don't just say it and then sit there and then be like, no. I've seen people do that too. Like, it's just being a genuine human and not having ego and understanding that everybody on the set is there to create the same vision, and be supportive and be, fun. And I think the people that overstep when they're producing on set are the ones that are feeling insecure, and so their ego comes into play. Like, do you know who I am? I'm the producer. Like, honestly, if all you have to say is, hey guys, I'm the producer, I'm here for you. If you need something, let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to be sitting behind Video Village, or I'm going to be over here or whatever. Just, that's how I would suggest not stepping on people's toes, but still being the leader. And if something is going wrong, feel absolutely free to speak up, because it is the director likes to think it's their set, but creatively it's absolutely 100% the director's set. But if you see a safety issue, you go to the AD. Understand what people's positions are is really important too. Like you said, Dave, about the producer who is coming to you about schedule and AD stuff. It's like, don't bother the director with stuff that's not his job. Like, I think it's this important thing to understand that once you're on set, there are jobs and there are departments and there are guidelines, and respect them. As much as you respect the crew, they'll respect you as a producer.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And because respect is a two-way street, right? So yeah, and I know people can definitely tell when a producer has it together, and then they can also tell when a producer just doesn't give a shit, and they just kind of And I mean, I had real quick to sort of end this. I had a friend of mine. He went on a set one time, and there was two producers who were just sitting on crates, just playing NBA Jam on their iPads, and he was like, what the hell? He's like, they should be getting this this is the first day of filming.
Yeah.
And they were just playing NBA, and he said you could tell from the get-go it was not going to be a good a good production. Jenna, I know we can talk.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it's at that. I mean, honestly, I guess the director just basically just at that point just gave up.
Yeah.
At the beginning, which is never good.
The first day. I know that we're almost out of time, but can I comment on that really quick?
Sure.
So here's the deal with what I was saying before about educating people on what producers do. Oftentimes producers that are inexperienced think that making a movie is literally just making the movie, meaning shooting, getting all the things ready for shooting and then post. But the reality is, a true producer, an indie producer, is somebody who can see the entire project from start to finish. And what that means is, working backwards from distribution to marketing to PR to post to production to pre-production to development to funding. All of those areas are the producer's job, right? And so those two producers who are playing freaking NBA Jam, like, I'm all mad right now, like, I would have literally went up to them and been like, are you serious? Do you have distribution for your movie yet? Do you have a marketing plan? Do you have the PR in place? What are you doing to make sure that this film doesn't just die once it's finished? That's the producer's job. So if you're ever on set and you've done a great job getting the set together and you think there's nothing left to do, there's so much more to do. So, get out there and do it is basically my advice.
And that's very good advice, Jenna. Jenna, where can people find you at online?
JennaEdwardsMedia.com, at Jenna Edwards on Twitter, Jenna Edwards Media on Facebook and Instagram.
And everyone, I will link to all of that in the show notes. You can always find me at DaveBullis.com. Twitter, it's at Dave_Bullis. Jenna Edwards, I want to say thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really, really fun.
Yeah, it was a total blast, and you know what? I'll have to have you back on sometime. We can continue to talk about, because there's a lot of stuff we didn't get to mention. We went on these, that's the sign of a great conversation. So, Jenna, I want to say thank you, and I wish you the best of luck.
You too. We'll talk soon.
Talk to you soon, Jenna.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.